Okay. How's everybody today, this morning? God bless everybody on this Monday morning, beginning or the second day of the week. For beginning of the week for a lot of people. But we have this onslaught, this attack going on. It's been going on for ages where people just lie like a rug on the floor, so to speak. They just lie and lie and lie. So we have this thing that we need to understand when we want to understand God and salvation. And it's the global flood. Probably our entire lives, we hear it again and again. Hello, Jerome. Good morning. Happy Monday. Yeah. So, and this disinformation campaign's been going on ever since I've been around. And they make a claim, and it's debunked and disproved. They make another claim, it's debunked and disproved. Every claim of any evolution is always debunked and disproved because it's contrary to what the facts are. But it's always an attack on the Bible. It's an attack on God's word and the truth of the Bible, which is what enables our salvation. So it's an attack on our salvation. So this, when they came up with deep time and everything, they wanted to disprove the Bible. So they said, look at these layers. It's evidence of deep time because it's more than thousands of years old, when in fact they're the result of the global flood. So then you have this attack on the flood being global, and that's an attack on salvation too, because if the flood wasn't global, then that means it was local and it only saved a few. That means the salvation arc of Jesus is only good for a few, or in other words, it only saves a few, and other people can be saved without Jesus, is what it means. So, what's the point of the illustration of the ark and the salvation that comes through Jesus if other people were saved without Jesus? Then you have the table of nations that is the result of the global flood and the dispersion of the children of the sons of Noah, grandsons of Noah. When you understand, you have to understand the Bible. Uh oh, I lost sound. Uh oh. Well, I thought I was remedying that by changing my location. So let me see. I don't know. Maybe I have to change something on here. Try something again. Anyway, I'll just go ahead and try. Um, so the when we understand the global flood, everything fits into place. JUS. Oh, back on? Yeah, sometimes my connection is like touch and go for some reason. But, anyways, when we understand the Bible, I mean, the Bible is key. The global flood is key to understanding the Bible because when you understand the global flood, and of course, the rest of the Bible, then everything fits in place. Everything falls in place. When you understand creation, everything makes sense. But when you try to disprove the global flood, then you're making room for things not making sense and things not lining up. But if you want things to line up in history, you want things to make sense, You have to understand, you have to start out with the global flood, or creation actually, but it includes the global flood. So when you start out with creation, everything makes sense. But when the people come along and try to disprove the global flood, it's really it's really attack on the Bible. It's an attack on your salvation. It's an attack on everything. Because what about the Table of Nations? The Table of Nations is every ancient civilization and everyone living today who is descending from every ancient civilization, all the nations. That's why it's called the Table of Nations, is because of the global flood that destroyed everyone, and the only ones left were the sons of Noah, the grandsons of Noah, and great grandsons of Noah, which are the Table of Nations. I could go through and name each one specifically and which nation they fathered and give you their Y chromosome so that every everyone living today can be tracked and traced back to the original Table of Nations and one of the grandsons or great grandsons of Noah. Ashkenaz in Europe is a great grandson of Noah. He's the R1A. Ripfath in Europe is the R1B. He's Ashkenaz's brother. And there's Togarma. We can go on and on. Javan is the progenitor or the father of all the sea peoples and all people that settled in the Mediterranean in places. That's he has the TY chromosome, and there's so much that fits into place, so much that makes sense as a result. You can understand why the TY chromosome is in America because these are Mediterranean people, because of the Phoenicians that went to America in the days of King Solomon before Israel split up. So before Israel split up, they also took the I-1, the I-2, the J-1, and the J-2 into the Americas. So that's basically, Israel and everybody associated with Israel, which is the G, the T, the E, J1, J2, I1, I2, because Israel hadn't split up yet. Israel, in the days of King Solomon, Israel wasn't split up. So you have the I-1 and the I-2 in America too. And everything makes sense. And of course, you have Nimrod. What's Nimrod? Is he a great grandson? You have Ham, Cush. Yeah, Nimrod's another great grandson. He has the CY chromosome in Asia. His descendants, because he was king of the whole world. He had what was known as the House of Nimrod that spread south all the way to Australia, east to the Pacific Ocean, north all the way through Siberia, all the way to the Americas, all the way through the Nadene people, and all the way to Central America, where they made the Olmec statues with people that look like Pacific Islanders, with Asian and African type features. And then all even into South America, where you have the Auca Indians, the Waoranis, the Quechuas, and the Wayus. They'll have the CY chromosome from Nimrod. And then there's the DY chromosome, which could be Nimrod's son or another brother of Nimrod, because it's hard to tell who's who if you don't know the history. But, anyways, an attack on the global flood is an attack on the truth of the Bible, it's an attack on the Bible, and it's an attack on salvation. Because if If it's not a true picture of salvation, if other people can be saved outside the ark, then it's not a true picture of salvation that you have to be in Jesus to be saved. So it's an attack on salvation. And of course, it's a attack on history, attack on the truth. Every ancient calendar, the Mayan calendars, the Egyptian calendar, Chinese calendars, the Hindu calendar, they're all 5,000 years old. All of them are 5,000 years old. And the biblical history is, of course, 6,000 years old. So what's up with that? There is no other history. There is no more history other than that of the Table of Nations, the ancient civilizations as we know them from history. The Assyrians, the Arameans, the Elamites, the Medes. These are all descendants of the great grandsons of Noah. The Thracians from Tiraz, great grandson of Noah, or actually a grandson of Noah. Tiraz, Javan, they're grandsons of Noah. Madai is a grandson of Noah. And Madai's probably the Q who went with all the way to America as well. Of course, the largest population in America is a QY chromosome. Hello, Christian Carpenter. Good morning. So in America, those are the major Y chromosomes that you have in America are the Q and the CY chromosomes. It's really peculiar unless you know the history. Everything fits together. That's what I'm saying. If you start off with a global flood and creation, which is creation, and involves creation, you will everything fits together. You will understand what's going on with everything. Everything falls. It's like a picture puzzle. Everything, all the puzzle pieces fall into place. So we have Nimrod, Nimrod's descendants in America early on with the Olmec statues depicting people with Asian and African features, both extremely Asian and more African features. You know, that doesn't make sense unless you understand the global flood and the descendants of Nimrod are the CY chromosome. Then it makes sense. It's not even a puzzle because the reason why they look like Pacific Islanders is because they're basically the same mix as Pacific Islanders. They're a mixture of the CY chromosome and the OY chromosome and the Asians or the Q. And the Q and the O and the N, they're all Asians. They're they're descendants of Japheth, or what we would call Eurasians. And that's why the Europeans have Asian similarities is because of the Japhethites of Ashkenaz and Riphath in Europe, the R1A and the R1B. But there was also a huge influx of Semitic influence into the autosomal DNA in Europe. That's why the Europeans don't look quite as Asian, even though a lot of them still do look Asian. Especially if the farther north you go, the farther east you go, the more Europeans look Asian. So an attack an attack on the global flood is an attack on your salvation, an attack on the Bible, it's an attack on salvation. It's an attack on creation. Even though there is no other history. There's no other human history other than that of the Table of Nations. So I know we can be nice to people, with differing views, but we can't waver at all with the global flood because, I mean, there's overwhelming evidence that the geology is a result of it. Fossils in geology are the result of the global flood. There's no changing that. You can't get rid of the evidence of the global flood and the Table of Nations. But that's why you have to understand that there was a global flood that covered the entire Earth and basically liquefied the Earth. Because what happens when you have a flood, the sediments are going to liquefy. So they liquefied and they redeposited. So that's what happened. The same as before creation, water covered the whole earth. There are sediment layers that are a result of the water covering the whole earth, and those are the layers below the great unconformity in the Grand Canyon. Those are sediment layers from before the global flood. And hello, Honesty Angel. Yeah, both camps agree sedimentary layers are created by flowing water. Yeah, but if they're claiming deep time, that's a problem. And if they're discounting the global flood, they're discounting salvation, the picture of salvation, which everybody had to be in the ark to be saved. Plus, they're discounting known human history. And yeah, we can tell which sediment layers are by water and which sediment layers are not by water, by air or by wind erosion, because they're different. But all the sediment layers, they're all deposited by water. They're one on top of each other. They're miles deep, all the way down to the great unconformity. And below the unconformity is igneous rock, which is not a sediment layer. And there are the layers that don't have fossils in them to speak of. You know, the upper layers, they say, oh, they have microbes in them. Well, that's to be expected. That should be expected that there would be microbes in those layers because that they existed before the global flood, and obviously microbes got in there, but the fossils didn't. I mean, the hard fossils, the bones and skeletons and fish and everything, they didn't get down in those layers to be buried by the global flood because there were at the creation or before the creation there weren't any animals to be buried in the sediment layers. That's why there are no bones in those sediment layers. And like I said, everything falls into place once you get the Bible correct. You get the facts of the Bible correct. Everything falls into place. And an attack on the global flood is an attack on the Bible. It's an attack on your salvation, and we can't fall for it. So, the disinformation campaign, this whole thing with evolution and deep time, is a disinformation campaign to try to get people to stop believing in the Bible. And the people that are gullible and don't want to believe the Bible anyways will go with the story. They'll believe in it and they'll go with it and they'll deceive as many people as they can. But if you want to know the truth, if you want to know reality, and reality is that we have a creator, then we have to stick with the facts and everything falls into place. Everything fits, nothing is confusing. It might be a little bit confusing if we don't have all the facts, but once we get all the facts, everything falls in place. Everything lines up and falls into place. Uh, especially especially the flood layers, sediment layers, and the fossils and the table of nations. So if the flood wasn't global, what's the table of nations, right? The table of nations are the grandsons and great grandsons of Noah. So what's the table of nations? What's the point of the table of nations if there was people that survived um, other than the ark, other than by the ark? That means you can be saved without the ark. That's if anybody comes with another teaching that that we haven't taught or that the apostles didn't teach, you know what we're supposed to do with them. And it's nice to be nice to people and everything, but when they come with a false teaching contrary to the global flood, that is contrary to the Bible, it's an attack on the Bible. It's a disinformation campaign, and they're falling for it. So we have to stick with what the facts are because it's very important to be true to God's word. And it's God's word that there was a global flood and that all were in the ark were saved, and everyone that's in Jesus will be saved. There's no other way of salvation. It's very important. And that's why we have the table of nations, is for all the nations to be saved. The word nations refers to the Japhethites in Europe, the nations, and as well as Egypt and Cush, and put the Phoenicians, the North Africans. So even the term the nations is referring to the table of nations, to the ancient civilizations other than the descendants of Abraham. But everybody can be traced. The Lydians, the the Cushites, Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, Put, which is the Phoenicians, and the R1A, the R1B, the Europeans, and then there's a R2 as well, which is probably Togarma, which is a great grandson of Noah. So we have all the names of all the people that everyone is descended from. And what I'm trying to do is to line up and identify each of the descendants of the grandsons and great grandsons of Noah. And of course, I don't have all the information to be able to do something like that, but other people can. Other people in other areas can find history, to fill in the information that I might not have as far as the different Asiatic people, the Asian people that we don't know about. But it seems clear to me that Meshach went north, so the NY chromosome is probably Meshach. The OY chromosome is the most populous nation, or the Y chromosome in the world, descendants in the world, so they're probably Magog. And then there's Tubal, which is probably K, which includes the Q, the M and the S too. So it'd be K, and is seems to be associated with the M and the S as well, even though they go all the way back to the beginning themselves. But the Q is probably Madai. Madai was the Medes, became the Medes, and they proliferated to the to the west as well as to the east, and they went all the way to America. And the descendants of Nimrod are C. It's very everything falls into place when you don't deny the truth of God's word. And it's very important because of God's word. It's God's word, it's the truth, it's actual history, and it has to do with our salvation. So we have to be faithful and true to God's word in every aspect, in every detail. God bless everybody, and have a great week this week, as I plan to do myself. God bless everybody.